I stared at Blake in disbelief as he knelt before me, holding out a sparkling diamond ring. "Harper, will you make me the happiest man alive and marry me?" My heart raced, and I felt a rush of excitement mixed with nervousness. This was all happening so fast, but I couldn't deny the love I felt for him. "Blake, this is so sudden." "Yes, I will." He slipped the ring onto my finger and we embraced, garnering applause from the other patrons of the high-end restaurant. In that moment, everything seemed perfect, like a fairy tale come true. Little did I know, the fairy tale was about to take a dark turn. A few days later, Blake and I were having dinner at his parents' lavish estate, where I would officially meet his family. I had heard stories about their wealth and influence, and I couldn't help but feel a twinge of anxiety. As we sat down at the table, Blake's mother, Carolyn, fixed me with a scrutinizing gaze. "Harper, what's your highest level of education?" I shifted uncomfortably in my seat. I graduated from a community college while my mom raised me alone." Carolyn's eyes narrowed, and she turned to my mother, Jennifer, who had accompanied me. "You raised her alone?" Jennifer nodded, her posture rigid. "Yes, I'm a single mother. I've worked hard to provide for Harper." Carolyn scoffed, and before I could react, she picked up her glass of wine and flung it at Jennifer, drenching her in the deep red liquid. "Mother, what are you doing?" Blake exclaimed, but Carolyn silenced him with a wave of her hand. "This engagement is over," she declared, her voice dripping with contempt. "Harper is not a suitable match for our family." I sat there, frozen in shock, as Carolyn and Blake's father, David, berated us, their words cutting deeper than any knife ever could. As Jennifer and I made our way out, I overheard Blake's voice from another room. "Compared to Harper, Melanie is perfect. Educated, well-connected, it's a no-brainer." My heart shattered into a million pieces, and a burning rage ignited within me. Without thinking, Jennifer and I burst back into the room, startling Blake and his family. "You'll regret this, Blake," I spat, my voice trembling with fury. "I'll make sure of it." Jennifer's eyes burned with determination as she added, "We'll ruin your precious family's company if it's the last thing we do." With those words, we stormed out, leaving behind a stunned silence. The fairy tale had ended, and a new chapter of revenge was about to begin. The next few days were a blur of anger and humiliation. I tried my best to maintain a professional demeanor at work, but every time I saw Blake, a wave of resentment washed over me. "Harper, can we just act professional?" he had the audacity to ask one day as we passed each other in the hallway. I fixed him with a withering glare. "Don't talk to me. Ever." His face fell, but I couldn't bring myself to care. He had shattered my heart, and his family had treated my mother and me like garbage. Meanwhile, Jennifer was on a warpath, determined to bring down the Turners at any cost. "We need everything on them," she told me one evening over the phone. "Financial records, emails, anything that could be used as leverage." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. They'll never see it coming. With a newfound sense of purpose, I started paying closer attention to Blake's behavior at work. I noticed him taking frequent calls in hushed tones, disappearing for hours at a time without explanation. And then there was Melanie, the woman he had chosen over me. She would strut around the office like she owned the place, always throwing me condescending looks whenever our paths crossed. One day, as I was working late, I overheard Melanie on the phone in the break room. "Don't worry, baby. I'll take care of everything. Harper is no threat to us." My blood boiled at the smug tone in her voice. She had no idea what was coming. Over the next few weeks, Jennifer and I meticulously gathered evidence of Blake's misdeeds. Financial statements that didn't add up, emails discussing shady business deals, even recordings of him bad-mouthing his own family. "They're going to pay for what they did to us," Jennifer said, her voice laced with determination. I nodded, my jaw clenched. The Turners had made a grave mistake in underestimating us. Their perfect little world was about to come crashing down around them. With our plan set in motion, Jennifer and I decided to pay one final visit to the Turners' estate under the guise of returning Blake's engagement ring. As we pulled up to the imposing gates, my heart was pounding with a mixture of anticipation and dread. "Are you ready for this?" Jennifer asked, her expression steely. I took a deep breath and nodded. More than ready. We rang the bell, and a few moments later, the gates swung open, allowing us to proceed up the winding driveway. As we approached the front door, it opened to reveal none other than Melanie, her perfectly coiffed hair and designer outfit a stark contrast to our more modest attire. "Well, well, if it isn't the scorned ex-fiancée and her mom," she sneered, looking us up and down with disdain. Before I could respond, Carolyn's shrill voice echoed from inside. "Who is it, Melanie?" "Just some unwanted guests," Melanie called back, her lips curling into a smug smile. Carolyn appeared in the doorway, her nose turned up in distaste. "What are you doing here?" I held up the ring box, my hand trembling slightly. "I'm here to return the ring," Carolyn scoffed. "Get out of my house." But I stood my ground, feeling a surge of confidence coursing through me. "Not until you hear what I have to say." Melanie rolled her eyes. This should be good. Ignoring her jab, I pulled out my phone and hit play on the damning recordings we had gathered. Blake's voice filled the air, discussing shady business deals and misappropriation of company funds. Carolyn's face drained of color as she listened, her eyes widening in horror. "Blake, what have you done?" As if on cue, Blake himself appeared, his expression turning to one of panic when he saw us. "Harper? Mom, what's going on?" "You tell us, son." David's gruff voice came from behind him. "Care to explain these recordings?" Blake's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, but no words came out. Melanie, however, found her voice. "Blake, you assured me everything was above board. You lied to me." The tension in the air was palpable as the Turners turned on each other, accusations and insults flying back and forth. In the chaos, Jennifer leaned over and whispered in my ear, "Their empire is crumbling, just as we planned." I allowed myself a small smile, feeling a sense of vindication wash over me. The Turners had brought this upon themselves, and now they were reaping what they had sown. "Good riddance," I muttered, watching as Melanie stormed off, her perfect facade finally shattered. After the explosive confrontation at the Turners' estate, I expected Blake to slink away in shame, tail between his legs. Instead, he had the audacity to show up at the office the next day, acting as if nothing had happened. As I sat at my desk, trying to focus on work, I could feel his eyes boring into the back of my head. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "What do you want, Blake?" I hissed, whirling around to face him. He held up his hands in a placating gesture. "Harper, I know things got heated the other night, but can't we just move past it, for the sake of professionalism?" I let out a humorless laugh. "Professionalism? After everything you and your family put me through?" Blake's expression hardened. "That's ancient history. Melanie and I have moved on, and you should too." My blood boiled at the mention of his new fiancée, the woman he had chosen over me, only for her to turn on him when the truth came out. "Don't you dare say her name in front of me," I spat. "And don't think for a second that this is over. Your family's downfall is just beginning." Blake's eyes flashed with something akin to fear, but he quickly masked it with a smirk. "Whatever helps you sleep at night, Harper." With that, he turned and sauntered away, leaving me seething. The nerve of that man, acting like he was untouchable. Over the next few weeks, Blake continued to pester me, sending me emails and leaving voicemails, all in the name of professionalism. Each time I deleted or ignored them, my hatred for him growing stronger by the day. Meanwhile, Jennifer and I were hard at work, gathering even more evidence of the Turners' misdeeds. Financial records, incriminating emails, you name it. We were building an airtight case against them, one that would ensure their empire crumbled to dust. And then there was Melanie. The woman who had once looked down her nose at me now seemed lost and adrift, her perfect life in tatters. Part of me felt a twinge of satisfaction at seeing her brought low, but mostly I just pitied her. She had been just as much a pawn in Blake's games as I had. As the weeks turned to months, the walls continued to close in on the Turners. Their once mighty company was hemorrhaging money and clients, and rumors of their shady dealings were beginning to circulate in the media. Through it all, I remained focused and professional, letting my work speak for itself. And whenever Blake tried to engage me, I shut him down with a withering glare or a curt "leave me alone." The time for words was over. Now it was time for action. And Jennifer and I were ready to deliver the final blow that would bring the Turners to their knees. As the weeks passed, my determination to bring down the Turners only grew stronger. Jennifer and I spent countless hours poring over the evidence we'd gathered, looking for any weak spots in their armor. "We need to hit them where it hurts the most," Jennifer said one evening, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Their reputation, their finances, everything." I nodded in agreement. "They'll regret the day they ever crossed us." Meanwhile, at the office, I couldn't help but notice Blake's behavior becoming increasingly erratic. He would disappear for hours at a time, only to return looking disheveled and stressed. I couldn't help but wonder what shady dealings he was up to now. One day, as I was leaving for the evening, I caught sight of Blake in a heated conversation with a man I didn't recognize. Their voices were hushed, but the tension was palpable. "You have to take care of this, Blake," the man hissed. "Your family's reputation is on the line." Blake ran a hand through his hair, his expression one of pure desperation. I know. Just give me a little more time." As they parted ways, Blake caught sight of me and froze, his eyes wide like a deer in headlights. Before he could say anything, I turned on my heel and walked away, my mind whirling with questions. What kind of trouble was Blake in now? And more importantly, how could I use it to my advantage? Over the next few days, I made it a point to keep a closer eye on Blake's comings and goings. I noticed him taking more and more clandestine meetings, always with different, shady-looking characters. It was clear that whatever he was involved in, it was deep and far-reaching, and if my hunch was correct, it could be the key to finally bringing down the entire Turner empire. As I shared my observations with Jennifer, her eyes lit up with a fierce determination. "We need to get to the bottom of this," she said, her voice steely. "No matter what it takes." And so we hatched a plan. We would tail Blake, document his every move, and gather as much evidence as possible about his secret dealings. It was a risky move, but one we were both willing to take. The first few times we followed him, it was relatively uneventful. Blake would meet with his associates, exchange hushed words and cryptic documents, and then go on his way. But then, one night, everything changed. We had been tailing Blake for hours, watching as he bounced from one seedy location to the next. Finally, he pulled up to a rundown warehouse on the outskirts of town. "This is it," Jennifer whispered, her grip tightening on the steering wheel. "I can feel it." We watched with bated breath as Blake slipped inside, disappearing into the shadows. After a few tense minutes, we decided to follow, our hearts pounding in our chests. What we saw inside that warehouse would change everything. After months of meticulous planning and gathering evidence, the time had finally come to confront Blake and his family head-on. With a deep breath, I steeled my nerves and rang the doorbell of the Turner estate, Jennifer by my side. The door swung open, and there stood Melanie, perfectly coiffed as always. Her eyes widened in surprise when she saw us. Well, if it isn't the scorned ex and her mother," she sneered. "Come to beg for scraps." Before I could respond, Carolyn's shrill voice echoed from inside. "Who is it, Melanie?" "Just some unwanted guests," Melanie called back, her lips curling into a smug smile. Carolyn appeared in the doorway, her face twisting into a scowl. "You two have some nerve showing up here." I held up the ring box, my hand steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "I'm here to return the ring, Carolyn, and to settle some unfinished business." Carolyn scoffed. "Get out of my house before I call the authorities." But I stood my ground, feeling a surge of confidence wash over me. "Not until you hear what I have to say." Melanie rolled her eyes. This should be good. Ignoring her jab, I pulled out my phone and hit play on the damning recordings we had gathered. Blake's voice filled the air, discussing shady business deals and misappropriation of company funds. Carolyn's face drained of color as she listened, her eyes widening in horror. "Blake, what have you done?" As if on cue, Blake himself appeared, his expression turning to one of panic when he saw us. "Harper? Mom, what's going on?" "You tell us, son," David's gruff voice came from behind him. "Care to explain these recordings?" Blake opened and closed his mouth like a fish out of water, but no words came out. Melanie, however, found her voice. "Blake, you assured me everything was above board. You lied to me." The tension in the air was palpable as the Turners turned on each other, accusations and insults flying back and forth. In the chaos, Jennifer leaned over and whispered in my ear, "Their empire is crumbling, just as we planned." I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. The Turners had brought this upon themselves, and now they were reaping what they had sown. As Melanie stormed off in a huff, her perfect facade finally shattered, Blake rounded on me, his eyes blazing with fury. "You did this," he spat. "You and your mother have gone too far." I met his gaze unflinchingly. "No, Blake. You brought this on yourself with your lies and deceit. It's time to face the consequences." With those words, I turned and walked away, leaving the Turners to their imploding empire. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. The fallout from our explosive confrontation at the Turner estate was swift and severe. Blake's family was in complete disarray, their carefully constructed facade crumbling around them. As the news of Blake's shady dealings and misuse of company funds hit the media, the Turners found themselves under intense scrutiny from the public and the authorities alike. Carolyn and David were forced to make a humiliating public statement, apologizing for their son's misdeeds and vowing to cooperate with any investigations. But even as their empire teetered on the brink of collapse, the Turners remained defiant, lashing out at anyone and everyone they could. Blake, in particular, seemed to have lost all sense of reason. "This is all your fault," he raged at me one day, as we crossed paths in the office. "You and your mother have destroyed everything." I met his gaze coolly, unfazed by his outburst. "We only exposed the truth, Blake. Your own actions did the rest." He let out a bitter laugh. "Truth? You have no idea what the truth is, Harper." Before I could respond, he leaned in close, his eyes burning with a mix of anger and desperation. "You think you've won, but this is far from over. I'll make sure you and your mother pay for what you've done." His words sent a chill down my spine, but I refused to show any fear. "Is that a threat, Blake?" He stepped back, a cruel smile twisting his lips. "Take it however you want, Harper. Just know that no one crosses me and gets away with it." With that ominous warning, he turned and stormed off, leaving me to wonder just how far he was willing to go to exact his revenge. In the days that followed, the Turner family's dirty laundry continued to be aired for all to see. It seemed like every day brought a new bombshell revelation, from shady business deals to illicit affairs and everything in between. And through it all, Blake remained defiant, refusing to take responsibility for his actions. Instead, he doubled down on his threats against me and my mother, making it clear that he wouldn't rest until he saw us suffer. But as the walls closed in on the Turners, a surprising ally emerged, Melanie, Blake's former fiancée. Scorned and betrayed by the man she thought she knew, she had no qualms about spilling every sordid detail of their relationship and Blake's misdeeds. "He lied to me from the start," she revealed in a tell-all interview. "I was just another pawn in his game, a means to an end." As Melanie's revelations hit the airwaves, the public's outrage towards Blake and his family reached a fever pitch. Protests erupted outside the Turner estate, with people demanding justice and accountability. And through it all, I remained steadfast, my resolve only strengthened by the knowledge that we were on the right side of this battle. Blake and his family had brought this reckoning upon themselves, and now they were facing the consequences of their actions. As the dust settled and the Turners' once mighty empire lay in ruins, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. We had fought for what was right, and in the end, the truth had prevailed. In the aftermath of the Turner family scandal, the fallout was swift and severe. Blake's father, David, was forced to resign from his position as CEO of the company, and Carolyn found herself ostracized from the social circles she once ruled with an iron fist. As for Blake himself, he faced a slew of legal troubles, with investigations into his shady business dealings and misuse of company funds. It was a humiliating downfall for someone who had once seemed so untouchable. Through it all, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. After months of meticulous planning and execution, our revenge had been achieved. The Turners' once mighty empire was in shambles, their reputation in tatters. "They got what they deserved," Jennifer said to me one evening, a satisfied smile on her face. "Their empire is crumbling, and it's all thanks to us." I nodded, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. We had fought for justice, and in the end, the truth had prevailed. In the weeks that followed, I found myself adjusting to a new normal. The company I worked for had undergone a major restructuring in the wake of the Turner scandal, and I was transferred to a different department, far away from the toxic environment that had once surrounded Blake and his family. It was a fresh start, and one that I embraced wholeheartedly. Gone were the days of walking on eggshells and dealing with Blake's constant harassment. Instead, I was able to focus on my work and thrive in a supportive, positive environment. As for my personal life, I found myself taking a step back from the dating scene. After the betrayal I had experienced with Blake, I was wary of opening my heart too quickly. But deep down, I knew that one day, when the time was right, I would find someone who truly deserved my love and trust. In the meantime, I poured my energy into my career and my relationship with my mother. Jennifer and I had grown even closer through our shared ordeal, and we found strength in each other's support. "You're an inspiration, Harper," she told me one day, her eyes shining with pride. "You never gave up, even when the odds were stacked against us." I smiled, feeling a warmth bloom in my chest. "I couldn't have done it without you, Mom. We're a team, always." As the months passed, the Turner family scandal faded from the headlines, but the lessons I had learned would stay with me forever. I had seen firsthand the consequences of greed, deceit, and entitlement, and I vowed never to let those toxic traits take root in my own life. Instead, I focused on cultivating patience, discernment, and a strong moral compass. I knew that true happiness and fulfillment could only come from living an authentic, honest life, something that the Turners had clearly failed to grasp. And as for the future, well, the possibilities were endless. With the weight of revenge lifted from my shoulders, I felt free to pursue new opportunities and embrace whatever challenges life had in store. One thing was certain: I would never again let anyone underestimate me or treat me like a second-class citizen. The Turners had learned that lesson the hard way, and I was all the stronger for it. "Asher, we need to talk. Now." I stumbled in the doorway, the sharpness in his voice catching me off guard. "What's wrong? Did something happen at work?" He didn't look up, fingers fidgeting with his phone. "No, it's about us, about you." The tension grew thick in the living room of our suburban Chicago home. Asher and I had been married for 5 years, a seemingly perfect match after meeting at a corporate event. I walked over and sat next to him, trying to decipher the meaning in his words. "About me?" I echoed, confused. Asher finally looked at me, his eyes steely. "It's about kids, Harper. My parents, my mom especially. She keeps asking when we're going to have a child." My heart pounded. We'd talked about children in the abstract, but nothing concrete. "I know it's a sensitive topic, but we've only been trying for a year." He sighed heavily. "Mom says we should get fertility tests. She's worried it might be, well, you." I recoiled as if slapped. "Me? You think I'm the problem?" "It's not about blame," he lied, poorly concealing his own doubts. "We just need to know. For us." An awkward silence settled between us. My eyes stung with unshed tears. "So what, you think I should get tested?" Asher nodded, still not meeting my gaze. "It's for the best, Harper, just to be sure." I rose from the couch, feeling a mix of anger and vulnerability. "All right, I'll do it, but you have to get tested too." For the first time, he looked uneasy. "Why me? It's usually on the woman." "Because it's a partnership," I said firmly. "Both of us should know." He grumbled something under his breath, but didn't protest further. That night, our dinner was eaten in silence, the clinking of cutlery the only sound. Evelyn's disapproving voice echoed in my mind, always demanding, always critical. I couldn't shake off the memory of her last visit. "Harper, it's been 5 years," she had said over tea, her perfectly manicured fingers tapping the table. "Asher needs to be a father. It's his dream." Evelyn was relentless, her sharp words cutting deep. I had smiled politely, choking on the bitterness I couldn't express. After dinner, Asher retreated to his office, leaving me alone with my thoughts. Our once seamless bond now felt like a frayed rope, barely holding on. Days turned into a blur. Appointments were made, tests were taken. The waiting was torture, with every passing hour intensifying my anxiety. Then the results came. I was fine. Relief flooded, but was short-lived. "What about you, Asher?" I asked, hopeful for a shared sense of relief. He shrugged dismissively. "I'm sure I'm fine." "It's usually on the woman, Harper." His refusal spoke volumes. I realized then how deep his doubts ran, seeded and watered by his mother's cruelty. I began to observe him more closely, his indifference, his growing distance. Each day felt lonelier. The home we built turned cold. With Evelyn's voice haunting from afar and Asher's silence deafening, our shared life dissolved into an unsolved mystery. "Maybe you should see a specialist, just to be sure," Asher suggested nonchalantly one morning over breakfast. I've already scheduled a test. What about you? I asked, finding it hard to keep the irritation out of my voice. Why me? It's usually on the woman, he repeated, taking a sip of his coffee. My heart sank at his dismissive tone. I decided to focus on the task at hand, hoping that clear results would force a change in his attitude. A few weeks later, my test results came back. The results show no issues on my end, I told Asher, holding the paper out to him. He barely glanced at it. Okay, he muttered, turning back to his work, as if the matter was of little consequence now. Asher, you promised you'd get tested too, I reminded him, trying to rein in my frustration. So he waved me off. I'm sure it's fine, Harper. Let's drop it. Days turned into weeks, and Evelyn's verbal assaults grew sharper, digging deeper. One evening, at dinner with Asher and his parents, she couldn't contain her disdain. You are the reason my son can't fulfill his dream of being a father, Evelyn hissed, her voice dripping with venom as she poked her salad. It's not my fault, I snapped, taken aback by the acidity in her words. Asher could be the one with issues, but he won't listen. Asher remained silent, his eyes fixed on his plate. His passivity felt like a betrayal, deepening the chasm between us. In the car ride home, I broke the silence. Why didn't you defend me, Asher? Your mother blames me for everything. It's not that simple, he sighed. She's worried about us. No, I retorted. She's worried about you, not us. I'm getting tired of this, Asher. Asher's indifference hurt more with each passing day. I found myself increasingly isolated, documenting these painful interactions secretly. Through audio recordings, I captured the coldness in Asher's voice and the cruelty in Evelyn's words. I needed evidence, not just for myself but for any future decisions. One evening, needing clarity, I broached the topic of counseling. Asher, I think we need to see a therapist. He laughed, a sound void of humor. Therapist? You think we're that bad off? I do, I insisted. We need help, Asher. Nah, he shook his head. We're just going through a rough patch. Frustration boiled over, but I stayed calm. This isn't just a rough patch, Asher. We're falling apart. The arguments grew bitter, our once warm home filled with cold silence or angry shouts. Evelyn's relentless bullying cast a constant shadow, and Asher's indifference made it clear he had sided with his mother. My heart breaking a little more each day, I began considering legal separation. I wasn't ready to give up entirely, but I needed to protect myself. The evidence I gathered, emails, recordings, even witness statements from friends, gave me a sliver of control. Yet, despite my anger and hurt, I still held on to hope, a hope that something or someone might turn things around before it was too late. You are the reason my son can't fulfill his dream of being a father. Evelyn's words reverberated in my mind as I sat across from her during another strained family dinner. Evelyn, it's not my fault. Asher could be the one with issues, but he won't listen, I countered, my voice cracking. She narrowed her eyes. Don't you dare shift the blame. My son is perfectly fine. This is on you. Asher sat next to me, chewing his food slowly, looking anywhere but at us. Asher, I begged, please tell her. He sighed, putting his fork down. Mom, enough. Let's not do this now. Evelyn shot me a triumphant look, as if she had won another battle in her twisted campaign against me. I pushed my plate away, appetite lost. Later at home, I tried to talk to Asher about counseling again. We need help, Asher. We can't keep going like this. I don't need a therapist to tell me what's wrong, he muttered, and I don't need one to make excuses for you. Excuses? I was incredulous. You think everything's my fault? The tests were fine, remember? He said coldly. If anyone needs help, it's you. The distance between us grew wider with each passing day. Asher's hostility became more apparent, and I felt more isolated in our once loving home. One evening, desperate for a resolution, I proposed a weekend getaway to rekindle our relationship. Maybe some time away from everything will help, I suggested, hope lacing my voice. He chuckled bitterly. You think a vacation will fix this? He shook his head. There's nothing left to fix, Harper. It felt like a punch to the gut. Are you saying you don't want to try anymore? His silence was deafening. I started to gather more evidence of Asher's growing indifference and Evelyn's relentless bullying. Every recording, every email, every witness statement from friends, each piece felt like a step toward reclaiming my life. One day, after a particularly harsh argument, I confided in my friend Leah. I don't know how much longer I can do this, I admitted, tears streaming down my face. "You deserve better, Harper," Leah insisted. "You need to consider separating from him." "I've been thinking about it," I whispered, feeling a mixture of fear and relief at the thought. Asher's behaviors grew more unpredictable. He came home late more often, his excuses flimsy. One night I confronted him. "Where have you been?" "Out," he replied curtly. "Out where, Asher? You stink of alcohol." "Why do you care?" he slurred, stumbling past me. "We're barely even married anymore." His words cut deep, but they also strengthened my resolve. I wouldn't let him or his vile mother break me any further. I needed to protect myself. The next day I met with a lawyer. "I'm considering separation," I confessed, handing over my collected evidence. The lawyer nodded sympathetically. "Given what you've documented, Harper, you have a strong case for legal separation." As I walked out of the office, the weight on my shoulders felt a little lighter. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I had to start taking steps to reclaim my life, even if it meant leaving Asher behind. "We're done, Harper. Here are the divorce papers." The words cut through the air like a knife. I looked up from my coffee, unable to hide my shock. "What? You're blaming me for something that's not even proven?" Asher pushed the papers across the table, his expression cold. "It's not just about the kids anymore. This isn't working." I stared at the papers, my world crumbling around me. "Asher, we can still fix this," I pleaded, my voice breaking. He shook his head. "No, Harper, it's over. I'm done." Tears welled up in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "You're making a mistake," I whispered. His eyes softened for a moment, but the coldness quickly returned. "Maybe," he said, turning to leave. "But it's my decision." I sat there, frozen, as he walked out the door. The sound of the car engine starting and then fading away left an eerie silence in the house. The divorce papers stared back at me, but I knew I couldn't just sit and wallow. I picked up my phone and called my lawyer. "He served me the papers," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We'll respond accordingly," the lawyer reassured. "Remember, you have a strong case, Harper." I spent the next days gathering all the evidence I had meticulously collected. Emails, audio recordings, and statements from friends who had witnessed Asher's growing hostility. They were all meticulously organized. Each piece felt like a small victory. One evening I was going through some old emails when I found a particularly incriminating one. It was from Asher's mother, Evelyn, outlining how she had planned to blame me for our childlessness. "Make sure Harper meets with the specialist," the email read. "If she's the problem, we can pressure her. If not, we need to consider other options for Asher's happiness." I forwarded the email to my lawyer immediately. "This could be crucial," I wrote. Days turned into weeks as the legal wheels began to turn. Meanwhile, I started making plans to move out. I didn't want to be in the same house where every room held memories of a happier time that now seemed so distant. I broke the news to Leah over lunch. "I'm moving out," I said, pushing a salad around my plate. "I'm proud of you, Harper." Leah said, her eyes warm with support. "You deserve to start fresh." Packing my things felt surreal. Asher was distant, rarely coming home. The few times he did, he barely acknowledged me. I kept my interaction with him minimal, focusing instead on the text messages and legal updates. Finally, the day came. A moving truck idled outside, ready to take my things to a new apartment. As I took one last look around the house, Asher walked in. He paused, taking in the scene. "So, this is it," he said, his voice flat. "Yes, it is," I replied, meeting his eyes for what felt like the last time. "Goodbye, Asher." He nodded, saying nothing more. I walked out, feeling a strange mix of sorrow and liberation. As the truck pulled away, Leah called. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm better," I said, feeling a sense of relief. "It's the start of something new." I knew the road ahead would be tough, but I was ready. With my friends by my side and the evidence strengthening my case, I felt a flicker of hope. It was time for a new beginning. "You deserve better," my friend Leah said warmly, handing me a box as we moved the last of my things into the new apartment. "Move forward, Harper. We're here with you." I smiled, grateful for her unwavering support. "You're right. It's time to start anew." The apartment felt like a fresh slate, devoid of painful memories. I started my first day in a new marketing firm with a renewed sense of purpose. The team welcomed me warmly, and I quickly immersed myself in the work, finding it a welcome distraction. One evening, Leah convinced me to join her at the local gym. "Come on, Harper. Exercise is the best therapy, she insisted, dragging me out of the house. I hesitated, but eventually succumbed to her persistence. At the gym, we walked into a class led by Ian, a personal trainer with an infectious energy. His bright smile and encouraging words made the grueling workout almost bearable. "Hey, great job today!" Ian approached me as the class ended, handing me a bottle of water. "You've got potential." "Thanks," I replied, a little out of breath, but feeling good. I needed this. "Well, you're welcome to join us anytime," he said, his eyes kind and genuine. Over the next few weeks, I found myself looking forward to gym sessions. Ian's enthusiasm and sincerity were a breath of fresh air in my otherwise chaotic life. We started talking after each class, and he soon learned about my recent separation. "I'm sorry you had to go through that," he said one evening, sitting next to me on a bench. "But it's admirable how you're handling everything." "You've got to keep moving forward," I said, echoing Leah's earlier words. "Staying stuck doesn't help anyone." Ian nodded. "True, and for what it's worth, you seem like someone who deserves all the happiness in the world." We continued to see each other at the gym and eventually outside it as well. He invited me to dinner one night, and I agreed, feeling a flutter of excitement and nervousness. At the restaurant, he made me laugh, sharing stories from his childhood and his journey towards becoming a personal trainer. I realized how easy it was to talk to him, how natural it felt. "Thank you for tonight," I said as we walked back to my apartment. "It's been a while since I've had a good time." "I'm glad," he smiled. "You deserve many more good times, Harper." As the weeks turned into months, Ian and I grew closer. He became a beacon of support, cheering me on as I rebuilt my life piece by piece. With supportive friends like Leah and the warmth that Ian brought into my life, I felt stronger than ever. One weekend, Ian invited me to meet his friends at a small gathering. As we mingled, I couldn't help but feel a sense of belonging that I hadn't felt in a long time. His friends welcomed me warmly, and Ian stayed by my side, ensuring I felt comfortable. "You're doing amazing, Harper," Leah said later that evening. "Look at how much you've grown, how happy you seem." "I feel like I'm finally moving forward," I admitted, smiling. "It's not easy, but it feels right." Leah squeezed my hand. "You've come so far, and we'll always be here for you, no matter what." As I looked around at my new apartment and thought of my new friends, I realized I was indeed starting a fresh chapter. It wasn't perfect, and it had its challenges, but it was mine. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about what the future might hold. "Wow, look at you glowing. Congrats on the baby news, Harper," Gabe exclaimed as he hugged me tightly. I smiled, feeling a mix of joy and anxiety. This company reunion was the first time I was seeing many of my old colleagues since the divorce. "Thanks, Gabe," I replied, patting my growing belly. Across the room, I spotted Ian chatting with a group of my former co-workers, his easygoing nature fitting right in. Just as I was about to walk over to him, I heard an all-too-familiar voice behind me. "Harper, pregnant? This must be a joke," Asher sneered, stepping into my view. I turned slowly, meeting his eyes with a steely resolve. "It's not a joke, Asher. I'm pregnant," he scoffed. "So you moved on pretty quickly, huh? Seems fitting." "Ian and I are happy together, and we're excited about this baby," I said calmly. Ian walked over, sensing the tension. "Everything all right, Harper?" "Yes, just clearing things up with Asher," I replied. "Asher, this is Ian." Ian extended his hand. "Nice to meet you, man." Ignoring the handshake, Asher's eyes wandered to my belly again. "So still think she's the problem?" he muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. Suddenly, Asher's current girlfriend, Taylor, appeared beside him. She looked between us, confused. "What's going on?" "Asher here is finding it hard to believe I'm pregnant," I explained, feeling a surge of boldness. "He always blamed me for our childlessness." Taylor's face paled. "Is that true, Asher?" Before he could answer, Ian spoke up. "You know, maybe it's time you looked in the mirror, Asher. Sometimes the answers aren't as obvious as we think." Asher's jaw clenched, and Taylor's eyes widened with realization. "You never took a fertility test, did you?" she asked him, her voice shaking with anger. Asher looked cornered, but he didn't answer. The crowd around us grew silent, whispers spreading like wildfire. "Harper isn't the problem, Asher," I said, feeling an unexpected wave of vindication. "Your refusal to consider that possibility cost us everything." Taylor turned on her heel and stormed out, leaving Asher standing there, seething. He glared at me one last time before following her. "This isn't over," he hissed as he walked away. Ian placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "You handled that well," he said. "I'm proud of you." "Thanks," I sighed, the tension easing. It needed to be said. We finished the evening surrounded by supportive friends, sharing laughter and stories. As we walked out of the reunion, Ian held my hand. "You okay?" he asked, concern in his eyes. "Better than ever," I answered, a genuine smile tugging at my lips. Finally, it feels like I can truly move forward. Back in our apartment that night, I reflected on the evening. The showdown with Asher felt like a turning point. No longer a victim of his manipulations, I felt empowered and ready to embrace my new life with Ian and our baby. As I drifted off to sleep, Ian's arm around me, I felt a sense of peace. The future seemed bright, and for the first time in a long while, I was excited for what was to come. "This isn't fat, Asher. It's our baby," I said, my voice firm as I stared him down. Asher's face twisted in confusion. "What?" Ian stepped closer, putting an arm around me protectively. "So, still think she's the problem?" he said, looking Asher straight in the eye. Taylor, standing a few feet away, watched the exchange with wide eyes. "Is this true, Asher?" she asked, her voice trembling. Asher stammered, his usual composure collapsing under the weight of the truth. I don't know. I never thought." Taylor's eyes hardened. "You didn't think because you didn't want to know the truth. You selfishly assumed Harper was to blame." "Taylor, wait." Asher reached out, but she recoiled. "I can't believe I trusted you," she snapped. "You made me think Harper was the problem, and now you can't even face reality." The room seemed to hold its breath as Taylor turned and walked out, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Asher stood there, looking lost and humiliated. I took a deep breath, feeling years of pent-up frustration release. "You should get tested, Asher. It's time you stopped hiding from the truth." He glared at me, but didn't respond as he stormed off after Taylor, the crowd parting to let him through. The rest of the evening was a mixture of congratulations and support from friends and colleagues. Despite the drama, I felt a sense of closure, knowing I had finally confronted the man who had caused me so much pain. Back at our apartment, Ian and I settled into bed. "You were amazing tonight," he said, kissing my temple. "I'm so proud of you." "I couldn't have done it without you," I replied, feeling grateful for his unwavering support. In the weeks that followed, I heard through the grapevine that Asher had finally taken a fertility test. The news spread quickly. Asher was the one who was infertile. The revelation crushed him, and it seemed Evelyn could no longer ignore the truth. Evelyn paid me an unexpected visit one afternoon. She stood at my doorstep, looking older and more worn than I remembered. "I need to speak with you, Harper," she said, her voice strained. I let her in, curious about what she had to say. "I'm sorry," she began, sitting on the edge of the couch. "I was wrong to blame you. Asher," she trailed off, tears filling her eyes. "This is his fault." Her apology felt hollow after years of torment, but I nodded. "Thank you for saying that, Evelyn." "I've disowned him," she continued, her voice breaking. "I can't support his deceit." Part of me felt vindicated, but another part felt pity. "I hope he finds a way to accept the truth," I said softly. Evelyn left quietly, leaving me with a mix of emotions. I knew I had to focus on my future, not the past. A few days later, Ian and I sat in the nursery, putting together a crib. "You know, he's going to have the best life," Ian mused, smiling at the thought of our baby. "And a wonderful father," I added, squeezing his hand. As we finished the crib, I looked around the room, filled with hope and love. My life had taken a turn I never expected, but I embraced it wholeheartedly. Ian pulled me close, resting his hand on my belly. "We've got this." For the first time in years, I believed it wholeheartedly. The painful chapters were closing, and new, beautiful ones lay ahead. "I have the family I always dreamed of," I said quietly, looking around our cozy living room filled with baby toys and soft light from the late afternoon sun. Ian smiled, his eyes filled with warmth as he held our baby boy Elijah in his arms. "And I'm the luckiest man to have you and our baby." The unexpected knock at the door broke the tranquil moment. I got up, curiosity piqued, and opened the door to find Asher standing there, looking disheveled. His presence was jarring, a ghost from a painful past now standing on my doorstep. "What do you want, Asher?" I asked, keeping my tone flat. "I need to talk," he muttered, shifting uncomfortably. "Please, just a few minutes." I hesitated but nodded, stepping aside to let him in. He looked around, taking in the warm, welcoming atmosphere of our home. Ian stood protectively near the baby, his expression guarded. "Make it quick, Asher," I said, crossing my arms. I need to apologize," Asher began, his voice shaky. "I know it doesn't change anything, but I'm so sorry for everything. Finding out I'm the one who's infertile, it destroyed me. Evelyn cut ties with me. Taylor left me." "I'm sorry you had to find out that way," I replied, feeling a mix of emotions. "But you treated me horribly, Asher. No apology can erase that." He nodded, tears welling in his eyes. "I know. I was a coward, and now I've lost everything. I just wanted to say sorry." "Thank you," I said, my voice softening slightly. "But this doesn't change the past." He nodded one last time, glancing at Ian, who held Elijah closer. "Take care of them," he said before turning and walking out the door. Asher's visit left me feeling unsettled, but also freed from the lingering shadows of our past. Ian came over, wrapping an arm around me. "You okay?" "Yeah, I'm okay," I replied, leaning into him. "It's just a lot to process." The air in the room felt lighter after Asher's departure, and I could breathe a little easier. Elijah cooed in Ian's arms, and I smiled, feeling a sense of peace. Months passed, and life settled into a happy routine. Ian and I reveled in the joy of raising Elijah, our laughter filling the home. One sunny afternoon, we took Elijah to a nearby park, enjoying the simple pleasures of family life. As we sat on a bench, watching Elijah gurgle and reach for a butterfly, Ian turned to me. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" I nodded, tears of happiness in my eyes. "Yes, we have, and I wouldn't change a thing." "I'm so proud of you," Ian said, squeezing my hand. "You've shown so much strength and grace." "Thank you," I whispered. "I couldn't have done it without you." We watched Elijah play, content in the life we had built together. The memories of hurt and betrayal were still there, but they no longer held power over me. The future was bright, filled with endless possibilities and the love of my new family. As the sun began to set, I felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over me. The trials and tribulations of the past had forged a path to the happiness and contentment I now enjoyed. "Ian," I said softly, turning to face him. "Thank you for being my rock, my partner, my everything." He smiled, leaning in to kiss me gently. "Always, Harper. Always." And as we walked hand in hand, with Elijah giggling between us, I knew that whatever the future held, we would face it together, stronger and more united than ever.